This week, we welcome Peter Warmka, the founder of Counterintelligence Institute and author of the newly released book, Confessions of a CIA Spy, The Art of Human Hacking. Senior security architect Brian Seeley from Sciemptive Technology joins us to discuss how to be a cybersecurity hero. In the security news, NVIDIA tries to throttle cryptocurrency mining, digging deeper into the SolarWinds breach, now with executive orders, NASA's secret message on Mars, vulnerabilities in Python and Node.js, hacking TVs and AV gear, nation-state hacking galore, patch your VMware vCenter, and is a password manager worth your money? All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. With the skills gap increasing, it's more important than ever to train your staff effectively and efficiently. Offensive Security provides training for your organization designed by the same minds behind Kali Linux. Here are two recent offerings from OffSec. OffSec Academy gives you the chance to earn industry-leading OSCP certification with dedicated one-on-one mentoring. You can also try Proving Grounds Enterprise, created exclusively by Offensive Security's InfoSec experts for highly realistic simulated networks. Visit securityweekly.com/offsec to learn more.
Are we going? Oh, sorry, I'm over there. He's the only person I know that can be both interlaced and progressive at the same time. He's anti-aliased, so it's Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 684, recorded on February 25th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, actually, over here in studio is Dr. Doug White.
They changed the damn monitors. I was confused.
I can't blame you.
I was like, oh, God.
Where do I look? The screen's everywhere.
I'm like surrounded by Jeff Mann on all sides. It's like those dreams I keep having. I wake up in a cold sweat. And yeah, that's the face that Jeff is giving when I wake up and screaming in the night. And my wife keeps going, why are you yelling Jeff, Jeff, when you wake up in a cold sweat? Like, it's not a cold sweat. It's a warm, moist sweat.
Speaking of Mr. Jeff Mann, Jeff is with us on the lines remotely. Jeff, welcome.
Apparently, I'm with you in sense around.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Happy to be here, I think.
Mr. Lee Neely is here with us as well. Lee, welcome.
Good to be here and not toeing to the grindstone right now.
Our other fellow Idahoan, Mr. Tyler Robinson. Is it Idahoan? Idahoan?
It's a
Idahoan, I think, would work just
Idahoan.
fine.
Good to have you, Tyler.
Someone's going to drop a joke there somewhere, I'm sure.
Something.
It's good to be back.
Nice. That is everyone, right? Okay. Our next live webcast will be held on March 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where you'll learn how to prepare Linux hosts for unexpected threats. Myself, Adrian Sanabria, and Brandon Edwards from Capsulate are going to get nerdy with Linux. It's going to be, Brandon and I are so, like, we're giddy with excitement on this webcast because we're like, oh, yes, a webcast. We get to be Linux nerds, and it's part of the program. It is sponsored by Capsulate, and you can visit securityweekly.com/webcasts to register. Make sure that you do that and sign up and register for the content in our archives at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Peter Warmka is a former senior intelligence officer with the CIA with over 20 years of experience in breaching the security of organizations overseas. Peter is an adjunct professor at Webster University's Masters in Cybersecurity program. He's a conference speaker, guest podcaster, and author of numerous publications on social engineering and fraud, including a new book titled Confessions of a CIA Spy, The Art of Human Hacking. Peter, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. We had you on, I think, our business or enterprise security, one of our other shows, right?
That is correct. Almost a year ago.
Yeah. And back then you talked about coming out with a book, and now here we are.
We have arrived.
There you go. So, Peter, how'd you get started in like the cybersecurity aspect of things?
Very interesting question, because when I retired from the CIA in 2010, I began to work as managing director for another firm in Orlando, and I was approached by somebody from Webster University that was looking for some individuals to work as adjunct professors in cybersecurity. And they came to me knowing about my background, my previous background. And I said, I really don't know anything about cybersecurity. They said, yes, you do. You would be perfect for our program because it was a course in counterintelligence, intelligence and counterintelligence as it relates to cybersecurity. So I undertook that course, and in the process began to incorporate a lot of information regarding social engineering, because it's a big part of actually intelligence collection and counterintelligence. So I incorporated that into the program, and the course did very, very well. And then I decided to go beyond just teaching about it at the university.
That's really awesome. What aspects of intelligence and counterintelligence really transfer well into cybersecurity?
Well, first of all, many times when individuals think about cybersecurity, they're thinking more of the technical issues. That's why a lot of organizations will put a lot of money toward beefing up their IT networks and improving the technology. But there's a big part that's really important, in my opinion, that's not covered, because it's actually the human element. Sometimes referred to it as the human factor, but in essence, it's being able to manipulate insiders within an organization to circumvent the technological controls, policies, and procedures within an organization to actually breach the organization and gain access to the data.
It's really about gaining, whether you're trying to turn someone at the organization into an insider for espionage, or you're trying to conduct a social engineering campaign via email for phishing, you really have to earn people's trust. And I know you have experience, I don't know how much you can talk about it, working for the CIA in earning people's trust. What was that like? What tips do you have for us evildoers with permission for earning people's trust, right?
No, you are so right regarding the importance of the trust factor, earning the trust. I would say, fortunately for us social engineers, unfortunately for victims, individuals in general automatically harbor a high degree of trust. They'll normally trust anyone, or an incoming email, an incoming message on social media, someone who calls them on a telephone, someone who approaches them in person. They will automatically trust what that person tells them, who they are and what they want and why they want it. And so sometimes it's just so easy. It's not so difficult to gain someone's trust. But in fact, overseas, when I was working with the CIA, in addition, well, first of all, I find a cultural difference. In the United States, people tend to be much more trusting in some foreign cultures. So in addition to the natural tendency to maybe trust somewhat, there are different things you can do. I always found like in anything, referrals are so important, or referrals that you can even invent. Typically, people do not verify if you say that you've been referred to them by an individual or by an organization, and they tend to want to open the door for you, even if they are not really interested in what you might have to say. They don't want to burn any bridges, and so if you go in there with a referral, it's like automatically you get their ear. You want to build as much in common with them as possible. When you meet somebody for the first time, there's this tendency sometimes, well, I really clicked with that person because there are some things you have in common. Maybe you've grown up in the same area. Maybe it's the same university you've gone to. Maybe you studied for a particular certification, whatever the case may be. So we try to study our targets in advance, learn as much as possible about them, and then incorporate in our approach something about their background that we automatically have that connection. And then it immediately builds rapport. In addition to that, of course, we want to be as warm and as possible, firm handshakes, a lot of eye contact, very personable, all these things that you would never think about it as a real good salesperson. And what a really good salesperson, how they accomplish it. How do they get someone to buy a product or service? they gain the trust of their customer or victim, if you want to call it that. But there's a number of different things that we can use to leverage to gain additional trust. But so much of that is automatically wired into the brain of people that we target.
How do you go about protecting that? Like, having done this a lot and abused a lot of people in a lot of physical environments, one of the big caveats and one of the big things that we get harped on is it is hard to provide good recommendation or training for users when inherently we're abusing their job function, or we're abusing that natural trust. They have to do business and they need to be cordial. So how do you train or protect or prevent this? And what is some advice for the people that are protecting organizations?
Well, I'll break this down into two areas. First of all, how can we minimize becoming a target? And an organization can minimize that by the type of information or the amount of information that they put out there. But even more importantly, if we're going to be targeting insiders, we're going to be targeting those that we can easily gather information on. In the old days, I would have to try to be given a requirement, an intelligence requirement, and have to figure out where is that information held, what organization, and within that organization, who has access to it. And of course, that typically information is really closely held. Not that many people have access to it. These days, with the digital information, it's really changed because we find a lot of people have access to a lot of information or can facilitate access to it. So we're going to look at insiders inside of an organization, and not necessarily only those that you think, well, they are the very top, they know everything important. It can be individuals pretty much at any level that we can target, and it's going to depend upon the amount of information we can collect on them. As I mentioned, previously I would have to meet with them, maybe for a number of coffees or lunches, and slowly gather information on them regarding their background and what makes them tick, their motivations and vulnerabilities. Now I don't have to even get together with them. I can identify them just by going online. And one of my favorite sources is going to be LinkedIn, where I can put the name of the organization, maybe the title of somebody in that organization, whether it's IT function or a receptionist or somebody from the C-suite or somebody from marketing. And I can do a search on the company and a position, and I can come up with a target list, and I can further define that by other parameters, of course, people that maybe are in a specific geographic area or who have gone to a specific university, et cetera. At the end of the day, I get a targeting list, and I begin to gather information on them just through social media. Look at LinkedIn, what kind of information you have, pretty much their entire academic and professional background. You can get an idea about what their aspirations are for within their career, or their passions. If they do volunteer work, they might list that. What kind of posts they make. You can learn a lot from them from a professional standpoint. Then you can move on to Facebook and other social media platforms like Twitter. You can learn so much about these individuals, and a lot of it will come down to how much information they're putting out there. If an individual is very reserved, we'll probably move on to somebody else. There's plenty of other fish in the sea who just put everything out there. And this is what we can leverage when we want to try to prepare an approach to them. So if I'm making an approach to somebody, whether it's an email, whether it's a phone call, whether I'm outreaching to them via social media or face-to-face, it's important for people to have back in their mind, okay, what this person is telling me makes sense, and they're asking me for something specific. They're asking me for information, or they're asking me to undertake an action. Okay, if I am not absolutely 100% sure that this person is who they say they are, or that they represent who they say they represent, how can I verify that before actually undertaking that action? That's going to be very important. The verification. It's not like what former President Ronald Reagan said, trust, then verify. If you do that in the world of social engineering, it's too late. You need to verify, then trust.
Peter, do you need to be able to get comfortable with lying if you're going to undertake these, obviously you work for CIA, and there are many of us in the field today that do social engineering engagements. And I know some of my friends are like, I don't know, like I'm not that good at lying. Is your advice to them to think of it more like acting than lying? But at the end of the day, you are lying. Like, how do you get comfortable with that, I guess? I like that. Because you seem like a nice guy, right?
You have to really be careful and separate who can I lie to and who I better not lie to. I wouldn't lie to my spouse. Right. But no, it's a very good question. I think when I first started out, it was difficult. It was really difficult because I came from a very an upbringing that you never lie. You be very transparent. You never lie, and if you told a lie, you felt really bad about it. I think I was able to rationalize it in my former career because I was doing it for a purpose that I thought was noble. You know? And that was the only way to get that mission done. So I become more and more. It was a process to become more and more comfortable with it, and it became after a while, it became so natural. Until the day I retired, of course. Now, I mean, I would utilize it for training purposes, but not actually to affect security breaches of any type. But yeah, the lying is part of the work, and sort of when I would get into the role of approaching someone, it is like acting. All of a sudden, I want to put on my acting hat, and I'm going to go in there and do it because I'm by nature, I'm introverted. If I'm going to a cocktail reception or a conference, I don't really like to interact with people, believe it or not. But if I have a objective, if I have a target, and I find that target, it's game on, and then I can become as extroverted as I need to be, and I can be as deceitful as I need to be.
And you have a persona, right? You have a persona or a character that you're going to portray in the engagement.
See, you're not lying if you believe that you are that person. Like when you fully adapt and just believe that is you, you separate. That separation is actually a really great characteristic to be able to take on. But at that point, like I really didn't feel like I was lying most of the time when I do it because I am that person in that role with that persona and that background. So that is separate from myself.
And that's role relativism too, though. I mean, role relativism is a concept about how you can separate your work responsibilities or your national responsibilities or whatever from your own personal beliefs. So that individual relativism is how you look at the world and say lying is bad. But role relativism is I'm doing this for national security, I'm doing this for my job or whatever, and how much of that role relativism you have often determines how far you can go with certain things like being a pen tester or being an undercover agent or whatever. Because I've known a lot of people and had family members who were undercover people, and you talk to them, and I've asked these same questions other people I knew, and it was like, how do you do that? How do you be like these four people that you've got all these cell phones for? And they're like, oh, it's just a persona. You assume it, you sit down and you do it, and it's just like, I don't know if I could do that. It's not because I'm inherently honest, but it's just it's just like I'm like, I don't know, that sounds crazy, and they're like, oh yeah, you just adopt a persona and you
Peter,
go on and do it.
That begs a question that the book is called Confessions of a CIA Spy, but what do you got to confess?
Well, it's sort of a play on words. I use that title because it's catchy, right? And actually, it kind of has a double meaning. I don't know if I mentioned this last time I was on your show. Before my career with the CIA, I was thinking about a totally different field. This is going to really blow you guys away based on this question you've been asking me about lying.
Priesthood.
I was studying for the priesthood. All right. And I was in a seminary, and I was thinking about entering the priesthood. And so if I'm going,
and that's how he's comfortable with lying.
No, but I mean confessions, right? We go into the confessional. And so I kind of play on words, and now I'm coming out and talking about this. But my goal is to really help organizations and individuals understand the methodology, because it's not only state actors that use this to steal state secrets or state actors that might be trying to steal proprietary information from companies, but it's also being used by criminal groups, by industrial competitors, activist groups. I mean, it's basically human hacking, and there are a lot of threat actors that utilize this. And it's not, what kind of surprised me is that social engineering is thrown out there and people might say they understand it, but very few people do understand it. It's not that well known.
What do most people miss about social engineering, Peter? What most people you find don't understand?
I think, well, they don't. A lot of them, when they hear social engineering, the first thing they think about is, phishing. Okay, emails. Yeah, and that's fine as a basis, right? Baseline. All these emails that are sent out, that will entice you to click on a link or open an attachment. They're usually going to be from like maybe a bank like Bank of America or Amazon or something. And these are really basic. And I just got to be careful about this, but they don't realize how sophisticated this can become. It'd be not just basic phishing, which a lot of companies will kind of sensitize their employees toward, but the actual spear phishing. If we're talking about breaches that will cost companies $7, $8, $9, $10 million, individuals behind this are going to spend they're going to spend time and resources, and they're going to really research their targets well. They're going to come up with spear phishing attacks for a specific individual that, based on what they've learned about this individual, they know even if this person has had some basic phishing training, that when they receive that incoming email with a link or an attachment, they're not even going to think twice because we've hit their motivation button, and they're going to be foaming at the mouth, wanting to open up that attachment or link because this is something that they truly want to learn about or an opportunity they want to seize. And beyond the spear phishing via email, I mean, think about it. And few people talk about the fact that social media platforms are perfect for spear phishing. If you have LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, or anyone where you have a capability, a messaging capability, where you can send a message with a link or an attachment, you can spear phish an individual. And it's even more dangerous for the victim because here, typically with social media, they see a picture, right? They see a picture and right away they think, okay, I got to know this person. Maybe I exchanged a couple of messages. I see their picture. I know who they are. But that picture typically is not going to be of that person, of course. It's going to be borrowed from someone else. Or now with AI, there's almost perfect pictures that you can have computer generated, and you can build fake profiles. And I mean, there's so much spear phishing can be done with social media platforms that people are not aware of these type of threats, or even using SMS texting, because those also can incorporate a text message, they can incorporate a link or an attachment as well. People are not really, they typically think email. I mean,
so I'm sorry, when we think about espionage, and let's turn the tables. There are nation states who want someone inside the U.S. government or company, they want that person to commit espionage. What percentage, I don't know percentage, but do most of them believe they're committing espionage and are just doing it as a vendetta, or are some of them kind of social engineered and thinking they might be helping someone? I know there was a movie about the FBI person, I believe, right? I forget his name, that was committing espionage with Russia.
Robert Hansen?
Yeah, it was Hansen. Yeah. But
he was a volunteer.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there's volunteers and there's people who are basically social engineered, right?
Right. The volunteers, in all cases, the volunteers are going to be malicious, right? If you're talking about a malicious insider, they're going to be malicious, and their motivations might be, they might have several different reasons why they might decide to do it. Perhaps it's just, it's revenge, or it's a lack of being recognized, or they want to get back at their organization, or they want a means of an income, et cetera. There could be a lot of different reasons. But I would say, I hope that the malicious ones are few, although they can be the most dangerous. You mentioned Hansen. There was other Ames. I mean, these have been really significant malicious insiders who were recruited, who volunteered to Soviet Union. The other ones, though, if we're going to if threat actors are going to try to recruit someone, or to becoming a source or providing this information, very, very seldom are they going to be approaching someone and say, I'm working for an intelligence service.
Right.
They're going to use a pretext. They could be, pretending to be working for another government entity, another government department, or maybe representing a commercial entity and doing consulting. And so they might not be, they're able to sort of put up that carrot that the information that they're asking for is not really, not really espionage. It's not really information that is considered national security. And it's going to be useful to help. It's going to help this particular organization maybe to conduct business in their country, where it's going to improve, the economy, or it's going to help. If it's a government entity, it's going to help improve relations between the U.S. and their particular country. I mean, you always try to look at why the motivations of why this person might be willing to cooperate. It usually ends up being money, or at least that ends up being a strong motivation. But initially, it might not be. It might be that they love to be able to share their insight. There are people who are, and you probably know them. Maybe some of you have this quality. They love to be mentors. They love to coach. And so if they're approached by somebody that really wants to have a better understanding of XYZ, they're likely to share that information because they want to help that person. Okay. There's others that, a lot of times my approach was, hey, I'm developing a relationship with somebody over a period of, we're talking about probably several months, not necessarily just a few weeks, several months. You're developing that relationship, you're developing that trust where the individual will begin to confide things to you about, their own personal life, their work, or their family life that they're not confiding to anybody. They completely trust you. Okay. So you're building that trust to the point of, many times people told me that because they're very, their best friend. And I believe, that for some of them in that particular case, at that particular time, they felt that way. So you get to a point where, hey, I'm beginning to work on this project and I know that you can help me. We can do this together as a team. All right. So they might even, I've offered people compensation, and initially they didn't even want to take the compensation. They just wanted to help me.
They want the recognition more than the compensation.
Recognition, and like to help. And then later on, they would be willing to accept some money. Because everybody can use money, whether now or in the future, for their retirement or for their children or for maybe some medical bills. So, every case is different, but a lot of times individuals who are recruited for whether it's the CIA or any state intelligence service, they really don't, and the vast majority of them don't realize. They might suspect, but they don't know for sure that they are providing information that's going to a foreign government.
Do eventually a lot of those folks find that out, or is told to them for their own safety? Because I imagine in many countries it's the safety of that person that we've recruited in various government agencies, for example, right? That their safety could be at risk.
No, you're absolutely right, because this is one of the biggest challenges when the individual doesn't understand, how important this relationship is, how important this information is, and how confidential, we want to maintain these meetings, because you're not meeting, at this point, you're not meeting in public anymore, right?
Yeah.
You're meeting in, a safe house or in a hotel or someplace out of sight where no one else is going to see this.
There's chalk markings on a mailbox somewhere. That's the way I understand it.
Well, yeah, that's Hollywood, but those are used, but there's more secure ways of doing those things. I can't get into those details, but no, you're absolutely right about the security factor. So you need to sensitize them enough that they realize that, hey, we really appreciate what you're providing. It's really important, but for your own safety, for my safety and your safety, we're going to have to incorporate a number of let's say parameters or procedures in our meeting arrangements so that it doesn't, it's not discovered. All right. And little by little, they become more and more aware. They can suspect that it's something that's maybe potentially going to the government. And eventually we might even, move it up. We might move it up and transfer it over for them to know that, hey, this is not a commercial, venture consulting anymore. We're turning this over to, you're going to be consulting to the government, or even, providing this information to intelligence service. It all depends. There's some people that would never agree to provide information to a foreign government, right? Ever, ever, ever. They would never do it, even if they've done it for a period of time and believing it's going to a commercial entity or going to, a U.S. government department. But if they find out, okay, this is going to be going out to the CIA, they'll say, some of them would say, absolutely not, I'll discontinue. So it's kind of like what they believe, where would it be crossing the line too much for them.
It's interesting, Peter, it sounds like you had to teach some people some OPSEC, which, 20 plus years ago is probably very different from how you teach people OPSEC today, right? There's so many different ways to communicate, and it gets kind of technical. Do you think that there's a lot of those challenges today, with government agents from various countries having to teach the people who are giving them information about OPSEC? Like, by the way, you need to use Signal and PGP and, all these things can get complicated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's been some tools that have been used for years already regarding, digital electronic transfer, let's say. I can't really get into those details, but it's been around for a while. The traditional means of dealing with sources, of course, is face-to-face, right? And depending on where you are, it can become more and more risky, where in some environments, you can meet face-to-face as long as you do it, securely in a hotel room or a safe house, or kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. But there's some other countries where you can't, because if the two of you are seen together, it can have dire consequences,
right?
Especially for the source. And so you have to, find a means of still exchanging information between individuals. I mean, you mentioned Robert Hansen, okay? Robert Hansen, his means of communicating, or his means of transferring information and receiving compensation, et cetera, pretty much using dead drops, right?
Yeah.
Pre-established locations where they would put down, whether it's a thumb drive or maybe documents in a container, and put it down in a particular location for someone to pick up later, then put up a signal saying, hey, it's been unloaded or it's been loaded, and then the individual coming back to retrieve it, et cetera. So there's no time when both of those individuals are actually physically together, because that in our business, that's the most risky operation. But still, these things can be discovered. I think there was in the press a number of years ago that the Iranians actually uncovered a lot of cases because of the certain use of the internet for communicating between case officers and their sources. It was actually exposed. So,
yeah, they were like leaving messages on websites, right? Wasn't it that case?
Yeah. So it's it's a risky business, but I would say by far some of the biggest compromises, and this is well known as well, have been the moles, and that happens in every intelligence organization, whether it's what Russia's had to deal with internally, probably what China has to deal with, and what we've had to deal with. Because when you find out an individual like Hansen or Eldridge Rames, who provided the Russians with the identities of our sources, right? Individuals who we recruited, or people who actually volunteered and were very productive sources, some of the best sources, but who were identified to the Russians, the Soviets, and I think in every case executed by them.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a risk game on either side, because when sources start disappearing, people start asking questions, and then they go looking for the mole. So there's always that game of, like, what do you do with the information, and what you do with the information could lead to how you obtain the information in both directions, right?
Yeah, I see you have a little bit of background on this, because the comments you're making absolutely right. So when you find out that what do you do if there's a mole? Do you come out and do you arrest that person right away, or does that have repercussions? That, okay, the fact that you picked this person up, that means that you know about it. How did you know about it? Might that jeopardize another source? I mean, there's a potential. There's a lot of thought from a CIA, from a counterintelligence standpoint, about how to handle these situations when they are discovered.
Yeah, I mean, we run into the same thing in cybersecurity as well. And I just watch a lot of movies and read a lot of books, Peter. I have no direct experience to draw on, so it's great when folks such as yourself come on the show.
Listen to a lot of books.
Listen to a lot of books.
Hey, it's coming out. It's coming out in audio. It's coming out in audio book.
Great. I'm looking.
Yeah, you mentioned to me you'd be interested in audio, and I said, "Well, let me do it." So it should be up within 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm listening to "The Perfect Weapon" by David Sanger.
Will there be a Russian version? language first?
Russian language version of the audiobook?
No, the Russians are pretty good with
English,
reading, English. But it's actually going to be, my next version is going to be in Portuguese.
Nice.
Believe it or not. I spent a lot of time in Brazil. Brazil's a big potential market for me. And a lot of Brazilians, sorry to sidetrack, but a lot of Brazilians, not many of them actually speak English or learn English in school. So it's going to be translated in Portuguese, maybe eventually Spanish, because I spent a lot of my career also in Latin America. So those are my first two foreign languages that I will probably have it translated into.
Go ahead. Sorry, someone else have a question.
I had a question. It feels like with all the internet stuff, the background for starting it has become a whole lot easier. And as you're doing all the information gathering, how likely is it that people say, "Oh man, I so saw you looking at my LinkedIn profile," or whatever, or do people even have a clue?
They don't have a clue. Good question. Just to give you a stamp, what I do sometimes, I've created a number of avatars that I use. And especially for if I'm giving a presentation, what's really impactful is I give a presentation, and one of the first questions I might ask to the group is, what is your criteria for accepting an invitation? And a lot of people, one of the responses is I accept the invitation from anybody that invites me. And how anybody chooses that, in the survey, they'll usually say, "Oh, only from people I know or people that are, recommended to me, etc." And then I go through my spiel. And then later on, I put on the screen this avatar. This avatar who approached a number of individuals from this group 5 or 7 days in advance, extended an invitation. Vast majority of them accepted the invitation. It's a person that doesn't exist. An attractive photo, of course. And exchange a message or two. And then the avatar would send to them within the LinkedIn message, send to them a PDF document and asking them to take a look at it. And maybe it could be, they're going to give a presentation and these are some of the points that they want to give, or they're going to be organizing a conference and they might want to invite them and want their input. So a lot of those individuals who accepted that invitation open up that link. And what it is, it's just a corrupted document. It's not malicious, but it simulates that it is malicious. And then when they actually see that picture of that avatar on the screen, it just blows them away. All of a sudden you see them like their eyes like lit up and say, "Wow, I didn't believe it could happen to me."
Yeah, and those of us in cybersecurity know that in social media, those are the Russians from the IRA that are creating accounts.
There's so many fake accounts up there. And one of the things I do is I sort of lead people through a tutorial about how to dissect fake profiles. Some of them are just so obvious. Yeah. Even in some of the better ones, it's pretty easy to dissect them to the point of, no, I wouldn't want to connect with this person because something's not adding up here.
Well, I think what people don't necessarily consider in that realm is that much like sports teams or groups or whatever, there's people with a lot of experience and people with not so much experience. And when you put that in a team, use Russia as an example, who's in charge of creating fake accounts to either commit espionage or disinformation campaigns, some of them are going to look more believable than others. And a lot of times it's just the skill level of the people who are working there, right? I'm sure you learned a lot more from your first day on the job at CIA than when you left 20 years later, right? There's a difference.
Well, definitely. And of course, a lot of the skills that I use now, for example, in trying to coach individuals on what to look for, and when I started, we didn't have social media. We didn't, it's sort of like the technology constantly evolves, right? The technology is a tool, but the human behavior really doesn't change. So technology can facilitate, can really aid the social engineer. It's another, additional avenues that can be utilized, additional tools, but also it can also, help individuals protect themselves if they know how to use it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Peter, you say that, because I think much like, communist regimes, are they going to use social media for better or good? Is it going to, it's a double-edged sword, certainly.
It really is.
It can help the situation because people can have a voice and get together and collaborate, right? And if they're in a communist regime or some regime like that, That can be helpful. But also on the flip side, those regimes can use, it's the same thing when we talk about social engineering. I can use the technology and social media to help me validate and have access to that information, but the attackers can too. So I don't think the pendulum's really swung in either direction. It's yet a different playing field, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And you mentioned the disinformation campaigns. What I find is typically you're going to have like Twitter, maybe Facebook to a certain degree, heavily involved in disinformation, and LinkedIn is really, in my opinion, more useful as a targeting tool. I want to really target somebody or target an organization. LinkedIn to me is the number one, and it is incredibly useful. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I really try to show people. I mean, probably I don't know what percentage. A large percentage of individuals, professionals, are on LinkedIn. So almost any organization is going to have several employees who have their profiles on LinkedIn, and those profiles are pretty robust. And what I found fake profiles that are put up where many times these individuals, they might not even have a picture of themselves. I mean, I'm automatically a little bit suspicious, but I know security professionals who don't like to put a picture of themselves because they don't want their face to be known if they are actually using it, for investigations. I understand that, but there are individuals that are putting up fake profiles without a picture, and they will have these really long lists of all types of certifications, training programs, training courses they've taken. And so when people see all that, they think, well, this person has this certification, that certification. But that's so easy. It's so easy just to list things if people are not going to verify it. I had this one approach me some time ago as an individual who claimed to work for Microsoft in Singapore, I believe. And he wanted to connect with me. So I decided, this individual claims to have he's a certified fraud examiner and certified protection professional. And since I have both of those, let me go online and see if I can find them up in the directories, right?
Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I was going to ask that, Peter. How much effort do you need to or want to put into your fake profiles online? I mean, obviously there's a pretty big scale, right?
Yeah.
But like, what's your sweet spot for maximum effectiveness without spending too much time, going off and getting the certification or, obviously that's really hard, right? But like, where's the good happy medium?
Well, the most important thing is getting past LinkedIn's initial due diligence. They claim that they are able to stop so many fraudulent accounts from being open, but a lot of it has to do with people just being a little bit careless when they set these things up. LinkedIn's going to be looking at, okay, where does this person claim to be located? Mm-hmm. What is where are they coming in? Like what IP are they coming in from? And if these things don't align, then they're going to be, skeptical, and they might ask them to provide a document and everything. But if you set this up from the get-go, LinkedIn is not really going to see any red flags. So then you build your profile. The important thing is, just like any, if you're looking at someone's resume, making sure that there's like no gaps in whatever your history is. What I try to do is look for organizations, whether it's the universities or where the individual claims to have worked, that are really large. Let's say in the case of one of them, the largest university in Brazil. How are you going to verify whether or not that person actually went to that university or not? And especially if it's a female's name, many times, female's name will change, married or single. It's very difficult to verify. Then going on to work for a number of multinational companies, once again, extremely difficult to verify unless somebody in law enforcement or something was really trying to conduct an investigation. Nobody is going to really do that. They're going to trust that. And then the number one credibility, let's say, factor is how many connections you have, right? Because typically, if you have only like 5 connections and you approach someone, some people will automatically click accept without even looking. This is funny. They'll click accept without even looking at the profile of the person, without looking at the profile. Those that look at the profile, if they see there's only a few connections, they might be a little bit leery, but it doesn't take long at all, to be honest with you, to get 500 connections. I can get that within 7 days easily. 500 connections. And then once you get those connections, that is probably the number one thing. People are going to look, 500 connections. This person's well known. And by that time, you probably got some mutual connections. Someone else from your network is already connected. And so that also serves to sort of validate in a target's mind that this person's legit. So it's relatively really easy to, you don't have to put a lot of time in it.
Do you think people, and I've always wanted to ask somebody this, that you could honeypot this? Did you ever see that being done? So now I actually want to do counterintelligence to see if people are trying to reach out to me. So I create profiles for my company that look very juicy to corporate espionage type people. And I've been asked this before as a consultant, like, should we do this? Should we, and I wasn't sure about it because it was like, that's the old honeypot conundrum about, are you doing yourself more damage by putting honeypots up? Because when we had honeypots running, we attracted lots of people who then came after us.
Right.
They got angry when they found out they were being played, and and then turned around and started trying to hack legitimate stuff. But I was just kind of always wondered, like, do they try to set you up as counterintelligence?
I mean, I've been approached by a couple of intelligence services, really suspected that intelligence services, but that was even before I set up counterintelligence. The fact that I was a former agency, I received a number of requests, maybe a handful or two handful or a dozen requests from people that I highly suspect that they may be working for another service, and I just I won't engage with them at all. I don't want to go down that path of even showing that I have any interest to even meet them.
Does it actually really matter from a counterintelligence or protection and engagement standpoint, your digital footprint? Like, we all have a pretty big one, and the amount of info you put out, like, in order to do business and be have a persona of some kind, some business brand, you have to have a certain amount out there. So is this solved by technology? And what is the value in limiting this digital footprint?
Very good point. One of the challenges today in the operational world is if you're creating a fake profile or fake persona, or you're working an alias, is how do you really build up that persona when people can so easily verify it through other means if does this person really exist or not? So I think a lot of it has to depend upon the sophistication of your target. If you believe that the target is going to try to verify, a few years back, all you really needed was to have a website. And if someone wanted to see, I received a call from, Jane Smith, and let me see if they have anything online. They mentioned this company, and they see that website, even though that website is so easy to create, automatically they start to trust it, right? And so it doesn't take very much to add to for the average target, for the average target who's not really sophisticated, who's not going to be suspicious. It doesn't take much to throw something additional out there. This is one of the things I turn around when I deal with companies. How do you validate, whether or not someone's LinkedIn is real? And if you have any doubt, even though if it looks so well done, in most cases, all you need to do is a Google search. And if all you can find is that LinkedIn profile and nothing else, that definitely is very telling, right? But the vast majority of people won't do it. They won't check that. They'll just believe what they see on that LinkedIn page, or they'll believe what that person is telling them in that message that they're sending to them. Unfortunately.
That feels like you're portraying a picture of a fairly low bar. Do you see that bar changing, or is that just sad reality?
It's a sad reality. I hope it changes, because that means I'm being somewhat successful in my endeavors. Nice. But to be honest with you, it is a low bar, and this problem has been around for a long time.
You've been lying to people for a long time, Peter.
I have, and people, not just me, but a lot of people. Okay, and some of these things come out, and even though people hear about it, I don't know, it's kind of like this complacency, or it will never happen to me. People just tend to think, well, it's not going to happen to me. And it's not until you actually suffer a breach in the company, or you have an identity theft, that all of a sudden, you become victimized, and now maybe you're going to change, you're going to change your the way your outlook in life. But then it's kind of late. It's like, you wait until your house gets burglarized, and then I'm going to put an alarm on, install an alarm. It's kind of like that. These things can happen. The likelihood that you're going to be a victim, maybe it's not so high, the likelihood, but there is that big there's a big potential, and it doesn't take very much to lower the prospects, lower the likelihood of being targeted. It doesn't, if you the more information you put out there will increase the likelihood of becoming a target. And even if you are targeted, there's a lot of things you can do to minimize the success of someone who's trying to social engineer you, just by trying to verify and validate who they are, who they say they are, right?
There's like a psychological tendency to, when I went to counterintelligence training, for clearances or whatever, they were talking about how, people, the more people think they're capable of negotiating, often the worse negotiator they are. And there was also, I think, probably the more confident you are that you can't be taken advantage of, the more likely you probably will get taken advantage, because you feel like, I see through everybody. I can, I've had people tell me that and sit there and say, I can read somebody by looking in their eyes. I always know when I'm being lied to, and and I'm like, well, I was lying to you right then, but you didn't seem to know that. But I mean, I think, do you think that's true? I mean, that people are like that.
Yeah, I believe, for two reasons. Naturally, they have their guard down, and they actually put a target on themselves. I mean,
yeah.
You gave me a challenge now. I'm going to definitely take that one on. Really, we love challenges. And actually, to me, the harder the target is, the more difficult the target is, the more, I don't know, the more passion we have for this. It's kind of like, it's difficult. I don't know. I don't want to brag or anything like that, but it's been hardly a target that I've ever had that I haven't been able to breach, because you're willing to put in more time, more creativity, and you always find a way. And I think we talked about this before, but there are organizations that we consider to be very hard targets. But we'll look for someone or some organization that they're doing business with, right? Where we can breach the security of that entity, which is a softer target, and use them as a conduit to actually get into the hard target. So, never say never. You can always be targeted, whether the threat actor is trying to gain information from you or using you as a conduit to get to the bigger fish. So I think it's unfortunate that people have that sort of false sense of security, whether they're an employee or sometimes people that are ahead of security departments. There's no such thing as being invincible.
Peter, I'm excited for the book. I know right now it's Kindle and paperback, and the audiobook you said is also in the works. Very excited about that. Confessions.
Yeah, and I just have a picture here.
Confessions of a CIA Spy: The Art of Human Hacking. Peter Warmka, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly this evening.
Thank you so much, Paul. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you do enjoy the book. And I would appreciate some feedback on it. I really would.
Absolutely. With that, we'll take a short break. Coming up next, Brian Seeley. Stick around.